Hey, good morning. Travels with Dottie here. And I'm doing this video because I want other people to enjoy the kind of life that I enjoy. There's so many of you out there that can do this. It's within your grasp and you just don't realize it. We can find ourselves trapped. Let me talk a couple of ways that I found myself trapped in my life. One was I had a long business career from, I got an undergraduate degree in accounting, graduated in 1982, and I worked my way from job to job, getting promotions across the country. I moved from Boston, and I finished there. I moved to LA. I moved from LA to Virginia. I moved from Virginia to Texas, to Florida. And all along the way, I got great jobs, paying great money, and I kept getting recruited for more and more money. The way it worked, and I'm assuming the way it still works now, is generally companies don't give their existing employees big raises. If you want to get a big raise, you got to jump ship to another company, and you get 20, 30, 40%, sometimes 50%. It's happened to me where I've almost doubled my salary moving. It's a funny thing. They're willing to pay Joe Smith, who they just know through a resume and an interview, a bunch more than they pay you, because they just like, I can't give you that big a raise. It just works that way. A couple of things about that, though, that I want to tell you about. I discovered very late in life that just because I'm good at something and make a lot of money doesn't mean that's what I should be doing. I wasn't very happy in the finance and accounting world. I worked for, here's some of the companies you may have heard of that I worked for. The Broadway department stores. You're from California and you're pretty old if you remember the Broadway. The Broadway was a department store just like Macy's, right? You know what Macy's is. But it was the biggest chain of department stores in California. And it was owned by a parent company called Carter Hawley Hale. And they owned department stores all over the country, many of which you might have heard of. And I worked for them in Los Angeles, and I did very, very well. I got promoted very quickly. My boss left and went to Virginia to work for Kay Jewelers corporate, and he recruited me to come with him, and got a huge salary increase to do that. And I worked there for a few years. And actually, in that case, Kay Jewelers got bought out by another company, and we all got laid off, but we got a good severance package. And I ended up going back kind of to the same company. Neiman Marcus Stores was a sister company to the Broadway. And that's how I got that job. The guy that had the top credit finance job there knew me from the Broadway, so he hired me in Dallas. There was, when I say I didn't enjoy myself, I enjoyed myself at Neiman Marcus for quite a long time. I was there for about 7 years, and at Neiman Marcus, it was really part of a very unique luxury retailer that had a rich history. And I was really at the center of that. I actually got to meet Stanley Marcus, one of the founders of Neiman Marcus. It was pretty cool. It was a cool job. I went from there to doing pretty lucrative consulting work in consumer credit. And one thing led to another, and I ended up with a job in I briefly moved to Florida to do this consulting thing, was making a lot of money. And I then moved to Austin, Texas, and got a job working as a senior director at Dell Financial Services. And that was the end of my business career. It was more money than I ever imagined I'd be making. I was treated very well by my supervisors, by my coworkers, subordinates, and clients. I had no legitimate complaints. Here's the thing. I didn't care about what I was doing. I didn't have a passion for what I was doing. So it made it over time, it made it tedious. And I got to I call it the Sunday night litmus test. If Sunday night rolls around and I'm starting to get depressed because I have to go to work the next day, I'm probably not I'm probably not doing the right thing. So that was phase one. Phase two, and I was about 43, 42, 42 years old at the time, I began to have a awakening about, hey, I don't want to keep feeling like this for the rest of my life. I want to do something different. And no, this is not the point where I jump in an RV and go across the country and become a nomad. No, that came many years later, but the story's integral. It was a continuum, a progression. The first wake up call was, I need to do something that means something to me, that I care about. And I had the sense to know how much money I make needs to not be a priority here. And I was lucky enough to be able to plan it a little bit, and I had enough cash coming in so I could eliminate most of my debts. My biggest debt was my mortgage. At the time I was living, get this, I was a single guy with a dog and a cat living in a 5-bedroom, 2-story home with a swimming pool on like a half an acre on a golf course in Round Rock, Texas. I had rooms I hadn't stepped in 3 or 4 times the whole time I was living there. It was ridiculous. And that was the first real trap I had gotten into, because I realized what I'd done as I moved from job to job and increased my income. I increased my living expenses commensurate with those jobs and those incomes. Someone literally said to me when I went to Dell, oh, the people at your level live in these neighborhoods. So essentially said, go live in those neighborhoods and those are the prices you're going to pay to live there. And like the relocation person and the real estate person, no one ever suggested to me, no one ever leaned over and said, Rob, you're a young single guy. Why do you want to live in this huge house with this huge mortgage? You could live in a beautiful, smaller place and really be putting some money away for your future. No one suggested that. I was an executive. I sounded and looked like I knew exactly what I wanted and what I was doing. I was kidding myself and everyone else around me. Well, when I had the Sunday night litmus, I kept failing the Sunday night litmus test. It got to be at a crisis, and I made the decision. I'm gonna walk away from all this. In fact, the real estate broker had 2 young daughters, well, young in their 20s, and I hired them to just liquidate everything in my house. I mean, so not just their mother was going to sell the house. I said, I want everything in it gone. Said, I'll give you 10% of everything you can get, and you can set the prices, and you don't have to call me. Just get rid of the stuff, and if there's stuff you can't get rid of, pay someone to take it away to the dump or donate it or whatever it is that you want to do. Just I'm leaving the house. I don't ever want to have, and I'll pay someone to clean it when you're done so we can sell it. And that's what I did. And I quit my job. And so what did I go do? I went back to school. Here was my thought process. What have I been, what are things that in my life that have made me happy? One was when I was a teenager, I was a junior fire department member in a volunteer fire department, and I just loved doing that. And I'd like to do that again. And I didn't think about doing it for a living. I was too old for most civil service. I was in my 40s. I couldn't like join a fire department as a professional. I guess I probably could have, but that I wanted to do it as a volunteer. The other thing was some of the I've always loved the idea of being a therapist because I had really a couple of good experiences, one in childhood and a couple in adulthood with therapists that really made a big difference in my life. And I was like fascinated by what they did. They get to sit in a room, in a comfortable room, and have really meaningful conversations with people about really interesting things. And they got paid for it. And they get to walk away thinking, hey, I might have made a difference in this person's life. Wow, let's do that. So I found out what I'd have to do is I'd have to go pretty much full time to school, and I could do that at night. And 2 years I'd have a degree. Then I'd need a minimum of 2 years of supervised experience, so 4 years total to get fully licensed. I can do that. So I went to St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. And in the meantime, I said, I needed to get out of Dell. I could have, at first the plan was I'll stay at Dell and go to school. And then I said, I can't do that. And I found a job listing that paid $30,000 a year salary. That's it. And that was far less than the annual bonus I was getting at Dell. But I didn't care. I found a cheap place to live. I found a guest house. There's a guy in there's a kind of funky neighborhood that I liked in Austin, and there was a street called Jim Hogg Avenue, and there was a young man that I think he inherited this pretty big house from his parents, and he had a guest house behind it. And a friend of mine did some work on it for me and said, Rob, I got the perfect place for you. And I went and met with the guy, and I think it was $700 a month, and I think it was all, it included utilities. I don't recall that I paid any utilities. So I could afford that $30,000 job that was with a nonprofit working with foster kids and homeless kids, and it didn't require that I have my license yet, so I could do that work. And that's what I did. And one thing led to another, and I developed this second career as a counselor that went on for, almost another 20 years. Certainly it went from, if you count the start of when I started college the second time, that'd be 2003. I retired 18 years later. So I had 18 years there as and I worked my way through different jobs, and the specific jobs aren't important, but I found things that I loved. And one of the things I really loved that I didn't realize I loved until I started doing it, it ended up not being having a practice where I sit in a comfortable room in an armchair and talk to people, 6 or 8 people a day. I liked that, but I didn't like doing it every day. I ended up finding there was a niche called emergency mental health services. And I found one of the most progressive places in the country to do that was Fairfax County, Virginia, right outside of DC. And I ended up working there for 5 years. Wonderful, wonderful experience. But when I was getting in my mid to late 50s, I caught a bug. I started, I think I was about 52 or 53. I got interested in camping, and I ended up buying a travel trailer. I lived in Idaho at the time, and I liked camping and I liked being in the trailer. I was kind of fascinated with it. In fact, I was living with my brother, and instead of just storing the trailer on his property, I ended up, gee, what would it be like if I slept in here tonight? And it was so wonderful. I just ended up living in the trailer next to my brother's beautiful house. And it'd be good. Gave him a little more space and room and privacy, and me too. And it was just, it was a unique, it was a really good experience. I loved, I discovered I thrive living in small spaces. I thought that was so cool. I loved the idea of the travel trailer RVs, and I started watching YouTube videos. And I think one of the first ones was it was Bob Wells with Cheap RV Living and Nomadic Fanatic, and the possibility that started opening up to me in my mind was, hey, there's ways to live very inexpensively and have lots of free time and have lots of freedom and less concern and worry, certainly about money. So the suggestion was there. I ended up leaving Idaho and going back to Virginia for the second time in my career. And I was living there, and got that job with Fairfax County, emergency mental health, was having a ball doing it. I really loved doing it. I did recognize, however, as an aside note, that there was stress related to the excitement. And the things I loved about emergency mental health were things that cause stress as well. You're often dealing with life and death situations, very dire situations when it's emergency mental health. So it takes a toll. It does. And I had the trailer. I actually paid someone to take it out there, and it was in storage. And it was in a luxury high-rise apartment. Circumstances changed for me, and I ended up moving out of that apartment and taking the trailer out of storage. And there was one place in the county of Fairfax that I could find that I could live in my trailer in. And I found that place, and I stayed there, and it was about 5 miles from my office. And I preferred the trailer over the high-rise luxury apartment I was living in Tyson's Corner, which is kind of a ritzy part of that area. And started watching more and more YouTube videos, and I realized this life was calling to me. I think that I knew intuitively that even though I enjoyed this job, if I continued, the stress levels were going to eat away at my body and my emotions. And I didn't want that. I did want to still keep helping people, and I realized, it's funny, before the pandemic, I've always had a private practice on the side, always, the whole time I've been licensed. And I always liked the idea of doing virtual sessions, but no one wanted it. No one was interested in doing a virtual. They all wanted in person. So I always had to rent an office, and I was seeing people in person. Then the pandemic happened, Nobody wanted to come into the office, but people still wanted therapy. So this is what it started looking at, what you're looking at now. And suddenly it went from no one wanted to do it, but to that's all anyone wanted. And when the pandemic sort of mostly went away, that remained. People got used to that. They didn't want to go to offices anymore. And I realized I could do pretty well on the road because I realized the legalities of it were, as a therapist, you're licensed by state. And they don't care where you're doing, like the virtual stuff, they don't care where you are. They only care where the client is. So if I'm in New Mexico, where I am right now, and I counsel a client virtually that lives in Virginia, I need to hold a license in Virginia. Likewise, if I talk to someone in Nevada, I need to hold a license in Nevada, Florida, Idaho. Those are all places I hold a license. And I also hold a license now in New Mexico. One of the things and I'll probably get a Nevada license too, and only for this reason, is if they tighten up on this, I think it'll be, if you're going to do the virtual stuff, you'll have to be licensed both where you are and where they are. And I'm 95% of the way there. So I just want to cover my base there, because if that happens suddenly, and I wouldn't be able to talk to anyone from Arizona because I'm not licensed there, and it could take sometimes anywhere from weeks to months to get a license processed and approved. And they're not cheap; they're expensive. You have to pay annual fees. You have to keep up with continuing education. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but I'm digressing. I spent 2 years with an Excel spreadsheet where I was constantly tweaking what this lifestyle was going to cost me. And as much work as I put into that, I got to tell you, starting the day I retired, which was December 1st, 2021, I never compared that spreadsheet to even a dime I was spending and ended up not needing it. Because I realized as I got into the lifestyle that I could make almost instant adjustments to my expenses whenever I needed to or wanted to. What do I mean by that? My first year, I decided, well, I'm going to go back up to Idaho. I got a job as a camp host in the same town, basically, that my brother lives in, for Army Corps of Engineers campground, which gave me a free campsite, free electricity, free sewer, free water I worked about 20, 25 hours a week. Very easy, nice, relaxing work in a beautiful campground on a lake. It was gorgeous. And, that took care of my living expenses from, I guess I got there in May and I stayed until September. Pretty inexpensive, right? Even with an RV in Northern Virginia, where I was staying, and that was with electricity and everything, it was $1,000 a month. And here I am, my first year, I'm camp hosting it. That was zero. I went to zero. Right, so I had to pay my Netflix and my phone bill and my internet, and I had done a good job of erasing my debt. So, and I realized there's just so many different things that I can do. One, I joined the Homes on Wheels Alliance, Bob Wells' nonprofit thing. I did volunteer work for them, and I found out how many people are able to manage the lifestyle of being on the road and being a nomad for far less money than I had access to. Is they would there are organized groups of people that they call them caravans. They caravan together, so they move from one free, like BLM 14-day place to another, following good weather, and their like rent it's zero, right? and they pool resources and, don't do a lot of fancy things and cook inexpensive meals. And here's the thing. It's not enough for you to just hear these people can do that, like live in a an older van or even a Prius, even a car with a tent. And you're thinking, well, of course people can do that, but what a miserable existence. The shock is when you actually meet these people and go out to these camps like I did and get to know them and socialize with them. So many of them are totally ecstatic and happy about their life. Much of the stress is gone. When you think about the stress of, oh my gosh, am I going to have my job? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to pay my rent? Can I afford this? Can I afford that? Am I going to be out on the street? Am I going to be homeless? This lifestyle lets you let go of that. And you can say, well, okay, but how am I going to make money? Right? I'm not retirement age yet. I can't collect Social Security. I'm 52. I'm 51. I can't do this. Well, there are lots of things you can do. That camp hosting can be, you can travel around. My friend Pup Camper 58, Cheryl, she's in Tennessee, and she's practically doing this camp. Their state parks are year round. She's not quite doing 365 days, but she's started. She did the summer. She's staying for the fall and the winter, and I bet she could stay as they love her. She could stay as long as she wanted. So you could, if you were into camp hosting in a place like a national park or a state park, those are the big ones where you just flat exchange your full hookup site for work, which is, trust me, it's easy work. I even did the dreaded cleaning bathrooms twice a day, and if I can do it, you can do it. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. But many of them, like Cheryl, she doesn't have to clean bathrooms. Other people do that. She just checks campers in and out. Probably rakes a few campsites. Check her channel out, Pup Camper 58. She has like typical day in the life of a camp host stuff, and there's lots of content like that out there. That's just one option. I mean, that doesn't get you any money, right? But what can you do for cash if you don't have an income source? Well, Robin Barrett is a fellow YouTuber that, just full disclosure, I don't know her. I've never met her. I have no association with her. But she does a Kindle book that is just a few dollars. Let me get on to, let me see what she is going for now. She updates this Kindle book. It's on how to find jobs online on the road, and really, really good resources. And like I said, she updates it so it's not stale. It's $8. She's got chained. This is work from home while you roam. It's on Amazon. Let's make it bigger so you can see this. And this is the 2025 edition. So the links and everything of where to find these jobs and what these jobs are all updated for this year. She's got, I'm very impressed, a self-published book. She's got 1,800 global reviews, and it's a 4.6 out of 5. 77% are 5-star ratings. There's very few legitimate criticisms of this book. Now, she does list jobs that are for professionals, and you need to know that. But she also lists plenty of jobs out there that do not require skills. They pay far less, yeah. But so it's if you're an accountant, if you're a nurse, if you're a computer programmer, all these things, you're going to find pretty high paying jobs on there. But if you've never done anything like that and you have maybe just a high school diploma, there are plenty of things that you can do, and they're contained in this book. There, have you ever heard of the beet harvest? Well, the beet harvest are the beets provide a lot of sugar for this country. People didn't know that. It's not just harvesting beets and packaging them and people buying beets in the produce department in cans. It's a source of sugar, and it's a big business. And during the harvest time, it's a pretty narrow window, just a couple of months every year. They need help. Not and this isn't going out and picking beets. This is like directing traffic, trucks coming in, dumping, that kind of thing. It's on your feet work, and it's hard, but for like a 4 to 8 week stint, you can pick up thousands of dollars in cash. A lot of people in this industry will do this kind of thing where they will find a gig where they work really hard for a few months and then they coast and don't do anything. And I've heard people talk about this as, I'm taking my retirement in chunks. And this is no joke. People do that. They may work the beet harvest, gather enough money to be able to coast for 2 or 3 months, and then they may go do something else. A lot of people like working in Amazon warehouses, distribution centers. They pay about $20 an hour. There's always the opportunity for overtime. You work hard. In both the beef harvest and I'm pretty sure Amazon still does this, but don't hold me to this. I know at one time they did have RV spots or contracts with RV parks that if you work for them, you get a free site. But I'm not up on. I heard a rumor that they don't do that anymore, but it was just a rumor. But the beet harvest certainly has places where you can park. And there are lots of other opportunities like that, depending on what you're willing to do and what you're able to do, what skills you have, where you can work for short periods of time, get some stacks of cash, and then relax for a few months. That's taking your retirement in chunks. And then we can get on to, and I've got videos on this, more than one, you can search for them, on retiring early on Social Security if you're going to hit 62. I retired at 61. I was going to hit, I was going to get my first 62 retirement check out of Social Security. I think it was April would be my first check. So I retired 3 or 4 months or like December 1st. So I was not getting any checks December, January, February, March. So 4 months. But I had enough money where I could make it through those 4 months. And then I knew that I'd start getting my Social Security check in April. So I made that work. It was, and then I knew I was, when I turned 65, I had two very small pensions. Back when I worked for Neiman Marcus, I worked long enough to be vested there. And so that was back many decades ago, but still that they made a promise, you can get this pension for the rest of your life, but you got to wait until 65. Okay. And then at the Fairfax County, I worked for the government there. I was there 5 years, and all it takes is 5 years to be vested. And so at 65, I'm collecting those two pensions. Trust me, they're small. I'm not living in the lap of luxury. I have enough. I have abundance. And I'm going to talk to you about abundance and wealth in a minute here. So I had those two things and my Social Security. And I'm still a therapist. So I am restricted in how much money I can make doing therapy and YouTube together. I'm restricted on how much I can make drawing early Social Security. So I'm under that amount so far. And by the way, people think that if you go over the amount, they stop sending your checks until and you lose that money. You don't lose that money. That money comes back to you. It goes back into your calculation when you do reach full retirement age. So that's the one way you can start getting your retirement money early, but have an adjustment at full retirement age. If during that period between 62 and 67, you earn over the earnings limit and have to give back, or they hold back because you're earning too much. I think they hold back $1 for every $2 that you earn over the limit. But that money doesn't get taken away. It goes back into, they do a recalculation at 67, and you'll get a little bit of a bump when you're at 67. Then at 67, they don't care how much you earn. That's what happens, full retirement age. Just wanted to throw that out there for you. And if you don't believe me, the IRS has a whole publication on it. It's very easy to read. It's in a PDF. Easy peasy. And those pensions, they don't count against the Social Security's earning limit. They don't count. Get it? They don't count. Only earned income. That's job stuff. So I know I'm getting off the topic a little bit. You can make this work. You can make this work. And you can have the wealth and abundance that I have. I thought you said you had little small pensions. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Willis? Wealth? Okay. There's wealth and abundance. I use those interchangeably. I am wealthy in living a life of abundance when the resources that I use to make me happy are less than the resources that I have coming in to pay for them. Think about it. You can make that happen, but what we're taught in most of our adult life is, well, the way to make that happen is increase the stuff coming in. Then you get to do whatever you want. What we don't focus in on enough is, what do we really need in our day-to-day lives to make us feel joy, contentment, and a lack of anxiety? What do we really need? I'll go back to that move I told you I made when I quit Dell in that 5-bedroom house. There were a few things that I didn't have those ladies sell. One was my giant Sony Trinitron TV. It was before flat screens. And this thing was very expensive, and it took like 3 guys to lift. I was going to take that baby with me. I like watching TV and movies. And the little tiny guest house I was in had a place I could put that. And see if you can follow what I was thinking about when I was thinking about where I was moving from and to. It's like, I'm really going to be comfortable in this kind of drab little tiny cabin. And I realized, where do I spend the most of my time? Well, I spend it in bed, sleeping. And after work, I come home, I make a little something to eat, and I'd sit in front of that Trinitron. I kept the bed, too. I kept the bed, and I kept the Trinitron, and I kept my desk and a chair. And that was it. That was all the furniture. There wasn't any place to put anything else. Oh, and I had a treadmill. I was able to get that treadmill in there. So, this is what I thought. When I'm in my bed sleeping, it doesn't matter what room I'm in as long as the climate's comfortable. Whether I'm in a room of a $500,000 house or a $700 a month cabin, it's the same bed. I'm unconscious. Who friggin' cares? And as for sitting in front of that Trinitron. When I'm sitting looking at the Trinitron, how much awareness do I have of what's around the Trinitron? None. It's the same. It's the same. Then the light bulb went on over my head. And I realized, wow, I get it. I get it. I don't need that big house. I need a nice, comfortable bed. Yeah, that works. I like watching TVs and movies. I need some kind of a screen and a sound system to do that. And I like sitting at my desk doing my work and my schoolwork in particular. And I got my desk. And I got a place to park my car. And it's warm in the winter and it's cool in the summer. That's when the light went off. I achieved wealth and abundance not by increasing my income, but by minimizing the things that I needed in my life to feel a sense of joy, peace, and lack of. And it worked. And it's still working. And when I moved on from there, I moved on eventually to the RV life in a 21-foot trailer. Now I have this little casita a couple of times a year, maybe 6 months out of the year. But I went on to keep reducing, as it was comfortable, incrementally, the resources and costs associated with how I was living my life, till I found the balance of, hey, I've got joy in my heart, I've got happiness, I've got contentment, I have low stress and a pretty profound lack of anxiety. And the cost of that in dollars and cents has just been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, despite everything seeming to get more and more expensive. You can do this too. You can do this if you're 50, 40, 30. Now, I'll say 20, but there's no one 20 listening. I know what my demographics are. You're all my age. You can do this. And you know what? If it doesn't work, sell the rig and get an apartment. It's not hard to bail. People bail out of this lifestyle all the time. And one big advantage that I had was this sort of incremental process of moving from a big fancy apartment to a trailer while I was still working full time, and acclimating myself to it and deciding, hey, I do like the idea of living in a small space. There are people that don't. There are people that, like, it would be a nightmare stress fest for them to be in an RV or a car, forbid, or a tent. Oh my gosh. This isn't for them. It's just not. There are other alternatives for them. And I wish I could, if you're one of them, I wish I could speak intelligently about what the alternatives are. The only thing I know is they exist. There's cooperative housing, there's subsidized housing, there's things that if you have the patience and you have the drive, you can live inexpensively. You don't have to live on wheels in an RV and do this lifestyle like me. But if you love the idea of living in multiple communities and having connections in multiple communities and just enjoy and embrace this lifestyle, you can do this. Yes, you can. Trust me, you can do it. Anyway, I don't know where this topic came from today. It's just what I felt when I got up this morning. And you know what, I had sort of plans of, you know what? I'm not going to just sit at my desk. I'm going to move around this big space, and I'm going to, because the camera follows me wherever I go. I can go by the TV. I can go over here by Dottie, and I can sit down here by Dottie. Right? Dottie's sleeping. George is hiding somewhere. But I forgot, and I just babbled in front of the, sitting at the desk, babbling away. I hope this video meant something to you. It means a lot to me. This is where my heart lives, this whole topic. And take care. And who knows what video is going to be tomorrow, or how long this one's going to take to render, upload, polish, get a thumbnail. Who knows? But you'll see it later today. We're on the Travels with Dottie same day videos. Take care. I appreciate you hanging in there with me.